the majority of the public can never question what they think is their reality. They think, and they're taught to think this and reinforced again in school and education, that we just evolved to this stage by chance and by the occasional martyr in history that had a good idea and gave their life to make it happen. And that's the traditional story we have down through the centuries. Yet nothing is further from the truth, because power has never voluntarily given itself up to another system. What it does is to give fronts of a new system, but you still have the same dominant minority controlling it from behind the scenes. This is to placate the people and keep them happy. With the advent of the 16th century, primarily, we find that humankind, especially the leisured classes, began to experiment into the sciences. The courts of kings and queens paid, in fact, salaries to educated people to investigate nature. Their prime concern wasn't really because they wanted to know how flowers grew. It was to know how things worked in order to try someday to get control over other things, but primarily mankind itself. That was always the goal, because leaders in all ages have been afraid of the general public. They believe in survival of the fittest. They don't see right or wrong, because right and wrong can change with every generation if it's made to be so from the top down. They understand these sciences because they've been given side or parallel educations to the general public, where they have access to data denied to the general public. They truly believe in eugenics. They always have believed in eugenics, and that's what really Darwinism is based upon: the survival of the fittest, and survival itself of the fittest, meaning they're willing to kill others in order that they should survive themselves. That's the bottom line. In the 1700s, the elite of Europe, the wealthy elite of Europe, had many meetings. There were so many philosophers at that time, giving all points of view, all sides of every story, and publishing them in books. And the elite were reading them, and they thought they could make use of the science of psychology, the science of the mind, of the mass mind. And they employed many of these philosophers to do their bidding. They employed ones to become champions of a new system that would front for them, which eventually was called democracy, much later on. When the public think they're free, when they think they have a voice, they're much easier to manage. Therefore, you must learn what they're after. You must learn how they think. You must learn what their motivations are. And you'll find by your own research, as everyone else must find by their own research and has in the past, that these people are megalomaniacs. They love power for power's sake. And that is also part of the Darwinian theory. The most successful are the ones who breed the best, in other words, pick the right mates and have offspring, and those offspring become even more elite and more power hungry. The power itself can be interchanged with the survival instinct in their own religion. And it is a religion because the whole Darwinist theory is based upon a belief. Theory, remember, is what the bottom people are taught. And theory means a good guess, but it's still a guess. All of that which you take as normal, including the changes in our society, our lifetime, is planned that way. It's planned before you were born. And the whole idea is how do you get the herd from, let's say, this field over to that field, which is quite a ways off. How would you get them to go through all these changes and to accept it all, every part of it, every step they take is normal, with all the changes that come along with it? Then you realize we're trained by professionals. Make no mistake, education is all about controlling the mind, to creating a mass mind for the general public. That's why it's a standardized education. You become standardized. It does not tell you to become a true individual. It doesn't promote individual thinking. In fact, it disdains it. It's all groupthink, especially today, more so. Everything is groupthink, and you must go along with the group or you'll be shunned. Again, old techniques that they used in religion and within religious societies as well. An education that was not authorized and controlled and carefully scrutinized by the top would not exist. What is good, according to those at the top, is to obey. A good society is an obedient society. This, of course, can cause conflicts down the road when the top want a different outcome within society. Society always thinks, knows where it's going, sort of vaguely knows where we're going, they think. And yet when they notice there's a conflict, then they lead want you to obey anyway. And when you don't obey, immediately they terrorize you or give you another fear of something coming down. It's either going to be the wrath of God or a comet, as in the old days, or it's going to be the Russians, it's going to nuke you, or something like that. Something to terrify you into obedience and to stun you into not thinking. Because when you're terrified of losing your life, you're not worrying about other theories or other problems of other people's. You're thinking about immediate survival. And when you're in that mode, you can be moved very quickly through massive changes within society. We see this even with the worldwide trend right after 9/11. It didn't happen spontaneously. All the agendas, all the anti-terrorism laws had been drafted up many, many years before and signed by all the NATO countries and even countries outside of NATO. That's why they all went into action at the same time and put the same laws on the books, and identical same laws and the same formula, because it was all planned that way. They will need a common enemy to keep man united. Man needs an enemy to obey government, especially when they're going to be heavily taxed and regulated and so on. You need an enemy to try and justify it. Therefore, the enemy, as within the Soviet Union, the borders of the Soviet Union, once they'd established their position and they had no real threats, they had to find enemies within to justify all that they were doing. As I say, everything that happens in a major way in history and is claimed as a surprise is nonsense. You can't keep little covert plans and rebellions secret in this day and age. It's impossible. Absolutely impossible. Big think tanks, big foundations, big organizations of spies, right down to little guys that are part-timers, are employed in every single country on the planet. And you can't plan something on the scale of 9/11 and keep it secret. It's impossible. It had to happen because it was necessary to happen. And now the whole world is going into ID cards and body cavity searches and all this nonsense as we get trained to obey, because when the greatest changes in the cultures are being forced through, they want you to be terrified at the same time, so you won't think about them so much. You're simply worried about your personal security and survival. Where does this leave the individual? Well, the individual is left out of this picture and this big agenda. Therefore, it's up to the individual to keep hold of the reality and find the reality for themselves that is truer to themselves, because ultimately that's all you have to go on. If you can't be true to yourself, then you can't be true to anything. You'll also be in flux. And when you're in flux, you'll be in despair. If you find yourself and you fathom your way through all of this morass of deception and conditioning, there's a peace that comes with it when you start to understand it. Suddenly things make sense for the first time. Many things begin to make sense for the first time. Everything that you'd read before suddenly makes sense for the first time, because you'll see it in a different light altogether. And then you must look around at the mayhem around you of all those who still think they're normal because they haven't broken out of the conditioning. And you feel very sad for them, very sorry for them as they go through the trials in a dysfunctional system. You see the squabbles and the fights over money, over property, over everything. All the usual squabbles that you're seeing as the culture gets harder and harder to keep rolling along in that hamster's treadmill. It's faster and faster. It can't happen. It's breaking down. And society is still trying to go on like the previous generation did, and it's not working.